The summer heat had been relentless that August in Phoenix, Arizona. Day after day, the sun blazed down on the desert city, pushing temperatures past 110 degrees, turning the streets into shimmering ribbons of heat and making the air feel thick enough to chew. It was the kind of summer that tested everyone's patience, that made tempers flare and air conditioners work overtime, that reminded everyone why they called this place the Valley of the Sun. The local news had been warning about the dangers of extreme heat for weeks. Stay hydrated, check on elderly neighbors, never leave children or pets in cars. The same warnings they issued every summer, the same reminders that in a place like Phoenix, heat could kill as surely as any disease or disaster. 6-year-old Emma Rodriguez sat on the front porch of her grandmother's house, her bare feet dangling over the edge of the wooden steps, too short to reach the ground. She was supposed to be inside, where it was cool, where the ancient window unit rattled and hummed its endless battle against the heat. But Emma liked the porch. She liked watching the neighborhood, the comings and goings of people she'd known her whole short life. The porch had a particular smell in summer, a mixture of hot wood and the roses her grandmother planted along the railing. Even in the brutal heat, those roses bloomed, their red and pink petals somehow thriving despite conditions that wilted everything else. Abuela said it was because she talked to them, told them stories, gave them love along with water. Emma wasn't sure if plants could really hear, but she liked the idea of it. Her grandmother's house sat on Maple Street, in one of Phoenix's older neighborhoods, where the houses were small, but the yards were big, where people still knew each other's names and looked out for each other's kids. The street was lined with mature trees that provided precious shade, their roots buckling the sidewalks in places, their branches creating a canopy that made this block feel almost bearable even in the worst of summer. This neighborhood had history. It had been built in the 1950s, when Phoenix was still a small city and the desert hadn't yet been conquered by air conditioning and swimming pools. The houses were modest, designed for a different era, with thick walls that held the cool of night and porches built for evening gatherings when the sun finally relented. Emma's grandmother, Rosa Rodriguez, had lived in this house for 43 years. She'd raised her children here, buried her husband from here, and now, in her 72nd year, she was helping raise her granddaughter, while Emma's mother worked double shifts at the hospital across town. "Emma, come inside!" Rosa called from the kitchen window. "It's too hot out there." "5 more minutes, Abuela," Emma called back. "I'm watching the clouds." There weren't any clouds, not really. Just the endless blue dome of the Arizona sky, bleached almost white by the intensity of the sun. But Emma had a vivid imagination, and she could see shapes in anything if she looked hard enough. Across the street and 3 houses down lived Mr. Harold Patterson, though everyone on the block just called him Mr. Harry. He was 84 years old, a retired postal worker who had walked these streets for 30 years, delivering mail before his knees finally gave out. Now he spent his days in his small house, surrounded by decades of accumulated possessions, watching game shows and tending to the small vegetable garden in his backyard that was his pride and joy. Mr. Harry was Emma's special friend. Every morning, when she walked with her grandmother to check the mail, he would be sitting on his porch, and he always had a butterscotch candy waiting for her. He told her stories about the old days, about what the neighborhood used to look like, about the famous people whose mail he'd delivered. Emma didn't always understand his stories, but she loved the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way he called her Little Miss and treated her like she was the most important person in the world. But Mr. Harry hadn't been on his porch in 3 days. His daughter, a busy woman named Patricia, who lived across town and visited once a week, had called yesterday to check on him. Emma had heard her grandmother talking about it on the phone with Mrs. Chen from next door. Something about Mr. Harry not feeling well, about the heat being hard on old folks, about how someone should probably look in on him. Emma worried about Mr. Harry. She'd made him a get-well card with crayons and construction paper, drawing a picture of him in his garden with his tomato plants, which she'd spelled tomatoes because she was only 6 and spelling was hard. She'd been planning to take it to him today, but her grandmother said they should wait, should give him time to rest. But Emma had a feeling, a strange, unsettled feeling in her stomach that she couldn't quite name. She kept looking at Mr. Harry's house, at the closed curtains and the newspapers piling up on the porch. Something wasn't right. She could feel it the way you feel a storm coming, that electricity in the air that makes your skin prickle. She was still watching, still waiting, when she saw it. A thin wisp of grey smoke curling up from somewhere behind Mr. Harry's house. At first, Emma thought she was imagining it. The heat could play tricks on your eyes, make things shimmer and dance that weren't really there. She squinted, shading her eyes with her small hand, trying to see more clearly. The smoke grew thicker, darker, and then she smelled it, that acrid, burning smell that was different from the usual summer smells of hot asphalt and dry grass. "Abuela!" Emma screamed, jumping to her feet. "Abuela! Fire! Mr. Harry's house is on fire!" Rosa Rodriguez came running, faster than Emma had ever seen her move. She looked where Emma was pointing, and her face went pale beneath her tan skin. "Dios mío," she whispered. Then louder, "Emma, go inside, now. Call 911. Tell them there's a fire at 742 Maple Street. Can you remember that?" 742 Maple Street, Emma repeated, already running for the door. Mr. Harry's house. Inside, the house felt shockingly cool after the porch. Emma's hands were shaking as she grabbed the phone from its cradle on the kitchen wall. She'd never called 911 before, but her mother had taught her how, had made her practice until she could do it in her sleep. 911, what's your emergency?" "There's a fire," Emma said, her voice high and tight with fear. "At 742 Maple Street. My friend Mr. Harry lives there. He's old and he's sick and the house is on fire." "Okay, sweetheart, I need you to stay calm." "What's your name?" "Emma Rodriguez. I'm 6. "You're doing great, Emma. Fire trucks are on their way. Is anyone inside the house?" "Mr. Harry. He's 84. He hasn't been on his porch in 3 days because he's not feeling good." "Okay, Emma. Can you tell me where the fire is? What part of the house?" Emma ran to the window, pressing her face against the glass. "I can see smoke from the back, behind the house. It's getting bigger." "Thank you, Emma. You're being very brave. Stay on the line with me, okay? Don't go near the fire. Is there an adult with you?" "My abuela." She went outside. "She's yelling for the neighbors to help." Through the window, Emma could see her grandmother in the middle of the street, waving her arms, shouting in Spanish and English. Doors were opening up and down the block. Mr. Chen came running with a garden hose. Mrs. Patterson from the corner was on her cell phone, probably calling 911 too. And then Emma heard them. The sirens. That high, wailing sound that meant help was coming, that meant the firefighters were on their way. "I hear the fire trucks," Emma told the operator. "They're coming." "That's good, Emma. They're going to take care of everything. You stay safe, okay? Don't go outside until the firefighters say it's clear." Emma hung up the phone, but she couldn't stay inside. She couldn't just wait while Mr. Harry was in danger. She went back to the window, watching as the first fire engine turned onto Maple Street, its lights flashing red and white against the buildings. The truck stopped in front of Mr. Harry's house, and firefighters poured out like ants from an anthill. They moved with practiced efficiency, unrolling hoses, pulling on equipment, shouting instructions to each other in a language of numbers and codes that Emma didn't understand. The smoke was clearly visible now, billowing from the back of the house, thick and black and angry. Flames licked at the eaves of the garage, and Emma could see the orange glow reflected in the windows. 2 firefighters in full gear approached the front door. One of them tried the handle, found it locked, and stepped back. With one powerful kick, he sent the door crashing inward. "Fire department. Anyone inside?" Smoke poured out through the open doorway. The firefighters disappeared into the grey haze, their flashlights cutting through the murk. Emma pressed her palms flat against the window glass. "Find him," she whispered. "Please find him." More fire trucks arrived. An ambulance, a battalion chief's SUV with its flashing red lights. The street was full of vehicles and personnel, a organized chaos of rescue efforts. Neighbors clustered on the sidewalk, watching with fearful eyes, some crying, some praying. Emma's grandmother came back to the house, her face streaked with sweat and worry. "Emma, are you okay?" "They're looking for Mr. Harry," Emma said, "but there's so much smoke. What if they can't find him?" Rosa pulled her granddaughter into a hug, but Emma kept her eyes on the house across the street. She watched as firefighters went in and came out, as they attacked the flames from outside with powerful streams of water, as they communicated on radios and consulted with each other with urgent gestures. Something was wrong. She could see it in their body language, in the way they kept going back inside and coming out empty-handed. They couldn't find him. They couldn't find Mr. Harry. The fire was spreading. What had started in the back of the house was moving forward, consuming the old wooden structure with frightening speed. The firefighters were fighting it, but they were also searching, and Emma could see that they were running out of time. Captain Michael Torres stood at the command post, coordinating his teams with the efficiency of 20 years of experience. He'd been a firefighter in Phoenix since he was 22, had seen every kind of fire this city could produce. But this one was bad. A fully involved structure fire with a confirmed elderly occupant somewhere inside, and his teams had searched every room, every closet, every space where a person could hide or fall or be trapped. No victim. "Command, this is Truck 7. We've completed primary search of the main floor. Negative on the victim. Command, Rescue 3. Secondary search of bedrooms complete. No one here. Engine 12. Checking the bathroom and utility areas. Nothing." Torres grabbed his radio. "All units, be advised, we have a confirmed resident who has not been seen in 3 days. Elderly male, mobility issues. He has to be in there somewhere. Expand search to attic and any crawl spaces. Copy that, Command. Truck 7 accessing attic now." Torres looked at the house, at the flames now visible through the front windows. They had maybe 10 more minutes before this became a recovery operation instead of a rescue. 10 minutes to find one old man in a house full of smoke and fire. Where the hell was he? Across the street, Emma watched with growing desperation. The firefighters kept coming out of the house, shaking their heads, looking frustrated and worried. She heard fragments of their conversations, words like negative and can't locate and running out of time. They couldn't find Mr. Harry. They'd searched everywhere and they couldn't find him. But that didn't make sense. Mr. Harry never left his house anymore. His daughter had to bring him groceries because he couldn't drive. He was in there. He had to be in there. Emma closed her eyes and thought about all the times she'd visited Mr. Harry with her grandmother. She remembered his living room with the old TV and the pictures of his wife, who had died before Emma was born. She remembered his kitchen with the yellow curtains and the cookie jar shaped like a cat. She remembered his bedroom that he'd shown her once when she'd asked to use the bathroom, with the big bed and the window that looked out on his garden. And she remembered something else. Something Mr. Harry had told her one day when they were sitting on his porch, eating butterscotch candies and watching the cars go by. "You know, little miss," he'd said, "this old house has secrets. Built back in 1952, before all these fancy building codes. My daddy helped build it, did you know that? Put in a root cellar under the back porch for storing vegetables from the garden. Nobody remembers it's there anymore, not even my Patricia. But I still go down there sometimes when the heat gets too bad. Cool as a cave down there, even in August. A root cellar, under the back porch, a place nobody remembered." Emma's eyes flew open. "The cellar," she breathed. "He's in the cellar." She didn't think. She didn't wait. She ran. "Emma!" her grandmother screamed. But Emma was already out the door, already across the porch, already running into the street toward the fire trucks and the firefighters and the burning house where her friend was trapped. "Hey, kid, stop!" Hands reached for her, but Emma dodged them. She was small and fast, and she had a mission. She ran straight toward the man who seemed to be in charge, the one standing by the SUV with the radio in his hand. "There's a cellar!" she shouted. "Under the back porch! Nobody knows about it, but Mr. Harry showed me. He goes there when it's hot. You have to check the cellar." Captain Torres looked down at the little girl who had somehow materialized in front of him. She was tiny, maybe 6 years old, with dark hair in 2 braids and eyes that were fierce with determination. "What did you say?" "Mr. Harry has a secret cellar," Emma repeated, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Under the back porch, from 1952. His daddy helped build it. He goes there when it's too hot because it's cool like a cave. You have to check there. He's in the cellar." "I know he is." Torres stared at her for a half-second, then grabbed his radio. All units, be advised. We have intelligence on a possible cellar or basement space under the rear porch. Built in 1952, may not be on any plans. Check the back porch for access. Repeat, check the back porch for a cellar access." "Command, Rescue 3. Copy that. Moving to rear porch now." Emma stood frozen, watching, barely breathing. Her grandmother had caught up to her, was holding her shoulders, but she didn't try to take her away. She understood. They both understood. Everything depended on what happened in the next few minutes. The back of the house was fully engulfed now. Flames roared from the garage and the rear windows, and the smoke was so thick you couldn't see the sky. But Rescue 3 pushed forward, 2 firefighters in full protective gear, crawling along the back porch where the fire hadn't quite reached yet. "I've got something," the voice crackled over the radio. "There's a hatch here, hidden under some boards. It's padlocked from outside. He's not down there unless he got locked in." "He locks it from outside when he goes down," Emma called out, not knowing if anyone could hear her. "Then unlocks it from inside to come up." Someone relayed the information. Torres was shouting into his radio. "Break the lock! Get that hatch open!" A crash. A moment of terrible silence. Then, "Command, Rescue 3. We have the victim." "Repeat, we have the victim. Elderly male, unconscious but breathing. He's at the bottom of some stairs. Looks like he fell. We're bringing him up now." A cheer went up from the crowd of neighbors. Emma's grandmother crossed herself, tears streaming down her face, and Emma stood perfectly still, watching as 2 firefighters emerged from the smoke, carrying Mr. Harry between them. He was limp, his face covered with an oxygen mask, his clothes dirty and disheveled, but he was alive. He was alive because Emma had remembered a story about a root cellar built in 1952. The paramedics rushed forward, taking over from the firefighters, loading Mr. Harry onto a stretcher. They were checking his vitals, calling out numbers, moving with that urgent efficiency that meant they were fighting to keep someone alive. Emma broke free from her grandmother and ran toward the ambulance. A firefighter tried to stop her, but she ducked under his arm. Mr. Harry, it's Emma." She couldn't get close. There were too many people, too much equipment. But for just a moment, Mr. Harry's eyes fluttered open. He turned his head, and through the chaos and the oxygen mask and the smoke still rising from the ruins of his house, he saw her. His hand lifted, just slightly. A small wave. A recognition. And then the paramedics were loading him into the ambulance, and the doors were closing, and the sirens were starting up again. Emma stood in the street, surrounded by fire trucks and hoses and shouting firefighters, and she watched the ambulance disappear around the corner. Captain Torres walked over to her. He was covered in soot, his face streaked with sweat, but he was smiling. "Hey," he said, crouching down to her level. "You're the one who knew about the cellar." Emma nodded, suddenly shy now that the urgency had passed. "What's your name?" "Emma Rodriguez. I'm 6. "Emma, you saved that man's life. Do you understand that? We searched that whole house, and we never would have found him in time, but you knew where to look. You remembered something nobody else knew." Emma thought about Mr. Harry's stories, about the butterscotch candies, about the way he always had time for a little girl, even when he was old and tired and his knees hurt. "He's my friend," she said simply. "I pay attention when my friends talk to me." Captain Torres looked at this little girl, this 6-year-old, who had done what 10 trained firefighters couldn't do, and he felt something shift in his chest. In 20 years, he'd seen a lot of heroes, but he'd never seen one quite like this. "Emma," he said, "I think you might just be the bravest person I've ever met." The fire was under control now, though Mr. Harry's house would never be the same. The back half was completely destroyed, the garage nothing but a skeleton of charred wood. The front had survived better, but the smoke damage would be extensive. Decades of memories, a lifetime of possessions, most of it gone. But Mr. Harry was alive. That was what mattered. The neighbors started to disperse as the excitement wound down. Emma's grandmother took her hand and led her back toward their house, but Emma kept looking over her shoulder at the ruins across the street. "Abuela, what's going to happen to Mr. Harry? Where will he live?" Rosa squeezed her hand. "His daughter will take care of him, Patricia. She has a nice house with a guest room. Mr. Harry will be okay. But his garden, his tomato plants, they're all burned. Gardens can be replanted, Mija. What matters is that Mr. Harry is alive to plant them again. And that's because of you." Emma thought about that as they walked up the porch steps and into the cool relief of the air-conditioned house. She'd saved Mr. Harry's life. She'd remembered something important when no one else could. She'd spoken up, even when everyone was telling her to stay back. It felt strange, good, but strange. Like she'd discovered something about herself that she didn't know was there. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and visitors. Emma's mother came home early from work, having heard the news from a colleague whose sister lived on Maple Street. She held Emma for a long time, crying and laughing at the same time, saying over and over how proud she was, how brave Emma had been. The local news showed up around dinner time. A reporter with perfect hair and a cameraman with a big lens wanted to interview the little girl who saved the elderly man. Emma's mother was hesitant, but Emma wanted to do it. She wanted people to know about Mr. Harry, about his cellar and his garden and his butterscotch candies. "Emma, can you tell us what happened today?" the reporter asked, holding her microphone toward Emma's face. "My friend Mr. Harry's house was on fire," Emma said. "The firefighters were looking for him, but they couldn't find him. But I remembered he told me about a cellar under his back porch, where it's cool in the summer. So I told the firefighters, and they found him. You ran toward a burning building to tell them. Weren't you scared?" Emma thought about it. "I was scared that they wouldn't find Mr. Harry in time. That was more scary than the fire." "What made you remember the cellar?" "Mr. Harry told me about it when we were eating butterscotch candies on his porch. He tells me lots of stories. I listen because he's my friend, and friends listen to each other." The reporter smiled, clearly charmed. "You're very brave, Emma, a real hero." "I'm not a hero," Emma said seriously. "Heroes are like firefighters who run into burning buildings. I just remembered something." But even as she said it, Emma wasn't sure that was true. Maybe remembering was a kind of bravery too. Maybe paying attention to people, really listening to their stories, was more important than she'd realized. The interview aired on the 10 o'clock news. Emma was already asleep by then, exhausted by the day's events, but her mother recorded it. She would show it to Emma tomorrow, would save it so Emma could watch it when she was older and understand what she'd done. In the meantime, the neighborhood buzzed with talk of the little girl who had saved Mr. Harry. Phones rang, text messages flew back and forth. People who hadn't spoken in years called each other to share the news. And in a hospital room across town, Harold Patterson lay in a bed surrounded by beeping machines and IV drips, his daughter Patricia holding his hand. He was weak, dehydrated, suffering from smoke inhalation and a fractured hip from his fall down the cellar stairs 3 days ago. But he was alive, and when he was conscious enough to understand what had happened, the first words out of his mouth were a question. "Emma, the little girl from across the street, she's the one who found me?" Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "She remembered you telling her about the cellar. She told the firefighters where to look. Dad, if she hadn't remembered—" "Butterscotch," Harold whispered, a smile crossing his weathered face. "I always give her butterscotch candies when she comes by with her grandmother. Sweet little thing. Always asks about my garden. Never interrupts. Never looks bored. Just listens with those big brown eyes, like everything I say is the most important thing in the world." Patricia squeezed her father's hand, her own eyes filling with fresh tears. "She's quite a kid." "She is," Harold agreed. "In all my years on the mail route, I must have talked to thousands of people, told them stories, shared memories, passed the time of day. But most people, they don't really listen. They're waiting for their turn to talk, or they're distracted by their phones, or they're just being polite until they can escape. Emma was different. She actually heard me. She remembered things I'd said months before, brought them up in conversation, asked questions about details most adults would have forgotten." He paused, gathering strength. The talking tired him, but he needed to say this. "That cellar saved my life once before, you know. Back in the summer of 1980, we had a heat wave that killed 60 people in the valley. No air conditioning in the house back then, just fans that pushed hot air around. I spent 3 days in that cellar, waiting for the worst to pass. Your mother was pregnant with you at the time. She said I was being dramatic, but I knew heat like that could kill, especially the elderly, especially those who lived alone." "You never told me that," Patricia said. "There's a lot I never told you. A lot I told Emma, though, sitting on that porch eating butterscotch candies. She had a way of drawing stories out of me. Made me feel like my memories mattered, like my life was interesting enough to share. She saved your life." Harold closed his eyes, but he was still smiling. "Then I owe her a lot more than butterscotch." The days that followed brought a flurry of attention that Emma found overwhelming. Reporters kept calling. People she'd never met wanted to take her picture. The fire department invited her to visit the station for a special ceremony. Even the mayor's office sent a letter congratulating her on her bravery. Emma didn't understand what all the fuss was about. She'd just remembered something. She'd just told the truth. That was what you were supposed to do, wasn't it? Her mother tried to explain. "What you did was special, Mija. Most people, when there's a fire, they stay back. They let the experts handle it. But you ran toward the danger because you had information that could save someone's life. That takes courage." "But I wasn't really in danger," Emma said. "The firefighters were between me and the fire. You didn't know that when you started running. You just knew you had to help your friend." Emma thought about that. Maybe courage wasn't about not being scared. Maybe it was about doing the right thing even when you were scared. Like the firefighters who ran into burning buildings. They had to be scared sometimes, right? But they did it anyway because people needed them. Her mother seemed to understand what she was thinking. She sat down beside Emma on the couch and put an arm around her shoulders. "You know what real bravery is, Mija. It's not the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and acting anyway because something more important is at stake. When you ran toward those fire trucks, you were scared. I could see it in your face when I watched the news footage. But you ran anyway because Mr. Harry's life mattered more to you than your fear." "I didn't really think about it," Emma admitted. "I just remembered the cellar and I knew I had to tell them." "That's instinct," her mother said. "Good instinct. The kind that comes from having a good heart." She kissed the top of Emma's head. "I'm so proud of you, baby." "Your father would be so proud of you too." Emma's father had died when she was 3, in a car accident that she was too young to remember clearly. But she had photographs, and she had stories, and she had the knowledge that he had been a good man who cared about other people. Sometimes she wondered if he was watching her from somewhere, if he could see the person she was becoming. "Do you think Daddy knows?" she asked quietly. "About what I did?" Her mother was silent for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I think he knows, Mija. I think he's been watching over you this whole time, and I think he's very, very proud." A week after the fire, Mr. Harry was well enough to have visitors. Patricia called Emma's mother to arrange a meeting. "My father keeps asking about her. He wants to thank her in person." Emma wore her best dress, the purple one with the white flowers, and she carried the get well card she'd made before the fire. It was a little wrinkled now, but she'd smoothed it out as best she could. The hospital was a big, confusing place, full of long corridors and strange smells. Emma held her mother's hand as they navigated to Mr. Harry's room, feeling small and out of place among all the adults in scrubs and white coats. But when she saw Mr. Harry, all her nervousness melted away. He was sitting up in bed, thinner than she remembered, with bandages on his arms and an oxygen tube in his nose. But his eyes were the same, those kind, crinkled eyes that always lit up when he saw her. "There she is," he said, his voice rough but warm. "There's my little hero." Emma ran to his bedside. "I brought you a card, Mr. Harry. I made it before the fire, but I never got to give it to you." She handed him the construction paper card, and he looked at it for a long moment. The drawing of him in his garden, the misspelled "get well soon" in purple crayon, the tomato plants that looked more like red circles on sticks. His eyes filled with tears. "This is beautiful, Emma. This is the most beautiful card I've ever received." "I'm sorry about your house," Emma said, "and your garden. Abuela said the tomato plants all burned." "They did," Mr. Harry acknowledged. "But you know what? Tomatoes can be planted again. Houses can be rebuilt. What matters is that I'm here to do it." He reached out and took her small hand in his weathered one. "Because of you." "I just remembered the cellar," Emma said. "You told me about it when we were eating butterscotches." "You listened," Mr. Harry said. "That's the important part. Most people, they don't really listen. They're thinking about what they're going to say next, or looking at their phones, or just waiting for you to stop talking. But you listened, you heard me, and you remembered. You tell good stories." Mr. Harry laughed, a sound that turned into a cough but ended with a smile. "Well, you're a good audience. Best one I've got." Patricia stepped forward, her eyes red from crying. "Emma, I don't know how to thank you. My father means everything to me. When I got the call about the fire, I thought—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "It's okay," Emma said. "Mr. Harry is going to be fine. He's going to get better and plant new tomatoes." "That's right," Mr. Harry said. "And you know what else? Patricia has a big backyard, room for a garden. Maybe when I'm feeling better you can come visit and help me plant it. Would you like that?" Emma's face lit up. "Really? Can I plant tomatoes?" "You can plant whatever you want. You've earned it." They stayed for an hour, talking and laughing and planning the garden that Mr. Harry would build at his daughter's house. Emma told him about the fire trucks and the reporters and the letter from the mayor. Mr. Harry told her more stories about the old days, about building the cellar with his father when he was just a young man, about the vegetables they used to store down there before refrigerators became common. When it was time to go, Emma hugged him carefully, mindful of his bandages and his oxygen tube. "I'll come visit again," she promised, "and I'll bring more butterscotch candies." "You'd better," Mr. Harry said. "I'm running low." The fire department ceremony happened the following Saturday. Emma wore her purple dress again, and her mother did her hair in fancy braids with purple ribbons to match. The whole Rodriguez family came, grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, filling the fire station with laughter and conversation. The station had been decorated for the occasion. Red, white and blue streamers hung from the ceiling, and a banner reading "Thank you, Emma" stretched across the main garage door. The fire trucks had been polished until they gleamed, and the firefighters wore their formal dress uniforms, looking sharp and serious and proud. Emma felt nervous as she walked through the crowd of uniformed men and women. These were real heroes, people who risked their lives every day to save others. What was she doing here among them? She was just a kid who had remembered something. But then Captain Torres approached her, his face breaking into a warm smile, and suddenly she didn't feel so out of place anymore. "There's our guest of honor," he said, shaking her hand as if she were an adult. "How are you feeling, Emma?" "Nervous," she admitted. "That's normal. Even firefighters get nervous sometimes. The trick is to not let the nerves stop you from doing what you need to do." He winked at her. "Something tells me you already know that." Captain Torres was there, looking very different in his formal dress uniform instead of his firefighting gear. He stood at a podium while Emma sat in a place of honor in the front row, trying not to fidget. "Today, we gather to honor someone truly special," the captain began. "A young person whose quick thinking and brave actions saved a life. Emma Rodriguez is only 6 years old, but she demonstrated courage that puts many adults to shame." He went on to describe the events of that day, the fire, the search, the frustration of not being able to find the victim. And then he talked about Emma running toward the command post, about her insistence that they check the cellar, about how her knowledge made the difference between life and death. "Firefighters train for years to develop the skills we need to save lives," Captain Torres said. "We learn how to read a fire, how to search a building, how to recognize danger signs. But there's one thing you can't train for, and that's the courage to speak up when it matters." Emma could have stayed on her porch. She could have assumed the adults knew what they were doing. Instead, she ran toward the danger because she had information that could save her friend's life. That is the definition of heroism. He called Emma up to the podium, and she walked forward on legs that felt wobbly with nerves. The crowd of firefighters and family members applauded, and Emma felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. Captain Torres presented her with a medal, a beautiful gold and red thing on a ribbon that he placed around her neck. Then he gave her a certificate that proclaimed her an honorary junior firefighter of the Phoenix Fire Department. "Emma, do you want to say anything?" he asked, stepping aside from the microphone. Emma looked out at the crowd. Her mother was crying. Her grandmother was beaming with pride. The firefighters were smiling and clapping. She thought about what she wanted to say, about courage and friendship and paying attention, about Mr. Harry and his butterscotch candies and his stories that she'd always listened to because he was her friend. "Thank you," she said into the microphone, her voice small but clear. "I just want to say that everyone should listen to their friends, even if they're old or they tell long stories or they repeat themselves sometimes, because you never know when something they tell you might be important." She paused, thinking. "Mr. Harry always made time for me, even when he was tired or his knees hurt. So when he needed help, I wanted to make sure I could help him too. That's what friends do." The crowd erupted in applause. Emma stepped back, her cheeks burning, clutching her medal in one hand and her certificate in the other. After the ceremony, the firefighters gave Emma a tour of the station. They showed her the trucks, let her sit in the driver's seat of Engine 7, demonstrated how the hoses worked and how the ladders extended. They explained the different types of fires and how each one required different tactics. They showed her the protective gear, the heavy coats and helmets and boots that kept firefighters safe in conditions that would kill an unprotected person in seconds. The station had a museum corner with photographs and artifacts from decades of Phoenix firefighting history. Emma studied the old pictures, the vintage equipment, the faces of firefighters long retired or passed on. Each photo told a story of dedication, of sacrifice, of people who chose to run toward danger while everyone else ran away. "We have a tradition here," one of the older firefighters told her. His name was Lieutenant Rodriguez, no relation to Emma's family, but the shared name had made them fast friends. "Every time someone does something heroic in this community, we add their story to our records. It goes in a book that every new recruit reads during training. Your story is in there now." "Really?" Emma's eyes went wide. "Really? Right there with all the professional heroes?" "Because what you did, that was just as important as anything any of us have done. Maybe more important, because you did it without any training, without any equipment, just with your memory and your courage." They gave her a plastic fire helmet with her name written on it in permanent marker, and they let her slide down the pole from the second floor, which she declared was the best thing she'd ever done. "You ever think about being a firefighter when you grow up?" one of the younger firefighters asked her. Emma thought about it seriously. Maybe. Or maybe a doctor, or a teacher, or someone who listens to people. Someone who listens to people. Yeah, like Mr. Harry listened to me when I told him about school, and I listened to him when he told me about the cellar. That's important, right? Listening? The firefighter smiled. Yeah, Emma, that's very important. Life gradually returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after everything that had happened. School started in September, and Emma entered first grade with a story that none of her classmates could match. The teacher asked her to tell the class about her summer, and Emma stood in front of the room and talked about the fire and Mr. Harry and the cellar under the back porch. The classroom was silent as she spoke. 22 pairs of eyes fixed on her, 22 mouths hanging open in amazement. Even Mrs. Gonzalez seemed captivated, leaning against her desk with an expression of wonder on her face. Emma described the smoke she'd seen from her grandmother's porch, the way it had curled up into the blue Arizona sky like a gray snake. She described the sound of the sirens, the chaos of the fire trucks arriving, the firefighters in their heavy gear rushing toward the burning house. She described the terrible moment when she realized they couldn't find Mr. Harry, when she understood that her friend might die if someone didn't do something, and she described running toward the fire trucks, toward the danger, toward the one person who might listen to what she had to say, running even though she was scared, even though everyone was telling her to stay back, even though she was just a little girl and no one had any reason to believe her. Her classmates listened with wide eyes. Some of them asked questions. A few of them started crying when she described the smoke and the flames, but most of them just stared at her with something like awe, as if they couldn't quite believe that someone their age could do something so brave. When she finished, the classroom erupted in applause. Her classmates clapped and cheered as if she were a movie star or a sports hero. Emma felt her face flush with embarrassment, but also with something else. Pride, maybe, or just the warm glow of being understood. "Emma, that was very exciting," her teacher, Mrs. Gonzalez, said when the applause died down. "You must have been so scared." "I was scared for Mr. Harry," Emma said, "but I knew I had to help him. That's very brave. Sometimes being brave means being scared, but doing the right thing anyway." Emma nodded. She was starting to understand that now. Brave wasn't the same as fearless. Brave was feeling the fear and acting despite it. Mr. Harry recovered slowly but steadily. The fractured hip was the worst of it, requiring surgery and weeks of physical therapy. But by October, he was walking again with a cane. By November, he was well enough to leave his daughter's guest room and move into an assisted living facility nearby, one that specialized in caring for elderly residents who needed a little extra help. The assisted living facility was called Sunset Gardens, and it was nothing like the depressing places Emma had seen in movies. The buildings were bright and cheerful, surrounded by landscaped grounds with walking paths and benches, and, true to its name, several beautiful gardens where residents could grow flowers and vegetables. Mr. Harry's room was on the ground floor, with a sliding glass door that opened onto a small patio. Patricia had decorated it with photographs and artwork from his old house, the things that had survived the fire or been stored elsewhere. There was a picture of his wife Mary on the nightstand, and a painting of the Arizona desert that had hung in his living room for 40 years. "It's not home," Mr. Harry told Emma on her first visit, "but it's not bad. The food is decent, the staff is kind, and I have my own little piece of land to grow things on." He showed her the small plot he'd been assigned in the community garden, just a few feet square, but bursting with potential. The soil was rich and dark, turned and prepared by the facility's maintenance staff, waiting for seeds and seedlings and the patient attention of a man who had been growing things his whole life. Emma visited him often. Her mother would drive her across town on weekends, and they'd sit in Mr. Harry's new room, which was smaller than his old house but cozy, and filled with the photographs and mementos that Patricia had managed to salvage from the fire. They talked about everything, school and friends, and the garden Mr. Harry was planning for spring. He'd made arrangements with the assisted living facility to have a small plot of land for vegetables, and he was already drawing up plans for what he would plant. Tomatoes for sure, he told Emma. And peppers, maybe some squash. What do you think? What about strawberries? Emma suggested. I love strawberries. Then strawberries it is. We'll plant them together in the spring. You can help me get the soil ready. I'd like that, Emma said. Their friendship had deepened in ways neither of them had expected. Mr. Harry had always cared about Emma, but now there was something more, a bond forged in fire and survival. And Emma, for her part, had discovered that the old man across the street was more than just a source of butterscotch candies and interesting stories. He was a friend, a real friend, someone whose life mattered deeply to her. The holidays approached, and with them came more attention for Emma's heroism. The local newspaper ran a feature story about her, complete with photographs of the burned house and quotes from Captain Torres and Mr. Harry's daughter Patricia. A national morning show reached out, wanting Emma to appear on television, but her mother declined, worried about exposing her daughter to too much media attention at such a young age. "You're already a hero," her mother told her. "You don't need to prove it to the whole country." Emma was secretly relieved. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted to be Emma, the girl who listened to her friends and helped when she could. On Christmas Eve, Emma's family had a special visitor. Mr. Harry, using his new wheelchair that Patricia pushed for him, came to dinner. He looked older than he had before the fire, more fragile, but his eyes still had that familiar twinkle, and he still had butterscotch candies in his pocket. "For my hero," he said, pressing them into Emma's hand when she hugged him. The dinner was warm and loud and full of laughter. Mr. Harry fit right in with Emma's extended family, telling stories that made the adults laugh and the children listen with rapt attention. He praised Rosa's cooking, complimented Patricia on her dessert contribution, and spent a long time looking at the family photos that decorated the Rodriguez home. "You have a beautiful family," he told Emma's mother, "and a remarkable daughter." "We know," her mother said, smiling at Emma across the room. "We've always known." After dinner, when the dishes were cleared and the adults were drinking coffee in the living room, Mr. Harry asked to speak with Emma alone. They went to the quiet of the front porch, where the December air was cool but not cold, a gentle Arizona winter settling over the city. "Emma, I want to tell you something," Mr. Harry said. "Something I've been thinking about ever since the fire." "What is it?" He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the street where his house used to stand. The lot was empty now, cleared of debris, waiting for whatever would come next. "When I fell down those cellar stairs, I thought I was going to die," he said softly. "I couldn't move. I couldn't call for help. I was down there for 3 days in the dark, listening to my house burn above me. I heard the firefighters come. I heard them searching, but they couldn't find me, and I couldn't make enough noise for them to hear." Emma felt tears pricking at her eyes. She hadn't known it was that bad. No one had told her the details. "I made my peace with it," Mr. Harry continued. "I'd lived a long life, raised a daughter, had a good career, loved my wife for 40 years before she passed. If it was my time, I was ready." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were shining with unshed tears. "But then I heard your voice, that little voice, coming through the smoke and the noise, telling them about the cellar, and I knew in that moment that I was going to live, because you remembered, because you listened, because you cared enough to run toward danger for an old man who used to give you butterscotch candies." "Mr. Harry," Emma didn't know what to say. "You saved my life, Emma. I don't mean that in a casual way, like when people say someone saved them by giving them good advice or helping them with a problem. I mean, you literally saved my life. I would have died in that cellar if you hadn't remembered it existed." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box wrapped in Christmas paper. "I wanted to give you something to remind you, when you're older, of what you did, of who you are." Emma opened the box carefully. Inside, nestled in cotton, was a beautiful pendant on a silver chain. The pendant was shaped like a flame, carved from some kind of reddish-orange stone that caught the light and seemed to glow from within. "It was my wife's," Mr. Harry said. "Her mother gave it to her on her 18th birthday. Mary always said it reminded her of the importance of warmth, of passion, of caring for others. She would have wanted you to have it." "Mr. Harry, I can't take this. It's too special." "That's exactly why you should have it," he said. "Because you're special, and because Mary would have loved you. She always said the best people were the ones who listened, really listened to others. That was you, Emma. From the first day we met, you were always the one who listened." Emma looked at the pendant, at the flame shape that seemed to dance in the evening light. She thought about Mr. Harry's wife, a woman she'd never met but felt like she knew from all his stories. She thought about the fire and the cellar and the 3 days of darkness that Mr. Harry had endured. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll take good care of it." "I know you will." Mr. Harry smiled, the crinkles around his eyes deepening. "Now let's go back inside before your grandmother sends out a search party. And I think I saw a plate of cookies that had my name on them." Emma laughed, the tension of the moment breaking. She helped Mr. Harry with his wheelchair, and together they went back into the warmth and noise of the family gathering. But she kept the pendant clutched in her hand all evening, a reminder of what she'd done and who she was becoming. The years passed, as years do, and Emma grew. She went from first grade to second to third, each year adding new experiences, new friendships, new challenges. The fire and the rescue became a story she told less and less often, not because she forgot, but because she didn't want to be defined by a single moment. Middle school brought new pressures, new social dynamics, new ways of understanding herself and the world around her. Emma navigated the turbulent waters of adolescence with the same quiet determination she'd shown as a child. She made friends, lost friends, found new interests, abandoned old ones. She discovered a love of reading, of music, of the natural world that surrounded Phoenix despite the urban sprawl. Through it all, she maintained her friendship with Mr. Harry. Their visits became an anchor in her life, a constant point of connection amid the chaos of growing up. She would tell him about school, about friends, about the books she was reading and the dreams she was having. And he would listen, the same way he always had, with that patient attention that made her feel like she was the most important person in the world. Sometimes she would bring friends to meet him. At first, they were skeptical, unsure why anyone would want to spend time with an old man in an assisted living facility, but after one visit, they understood. Mr. Harry had a way of making everyone feel welcome, of drawing out their stories and making them feel heard. He was like a grandfather to the whole neighborhood, a repository of wisdom and warmth that anyone could access. "Your friends are always welcome here," he told Emma once. "The more the merrier. These old walls could use some young energy." But she kept listening. That was the lesson she'd learned that August day, the one that stuck with her more than any award or medal or newspaper article. Pay attention to people. Hear their stories. Remember the details that seem unimportant, because you never know when they might save a life. Mr. Harry lived for 5 more years after the fire. He planted his garden every spring with Emma's help, and by summer they would harvest tomatoes and peppers and the strawberries that Emma had requested. He told her more stories about his childhood and his career and his travels with Mary before she got sick. And Emma listened to everyone, storing them away in her memory like treasures. When he died, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 89, Emma was 13 years old. She went to his funeral, wearing the flame pendant he'd given her, and she spoke at the service because Patricia asked her to. The church was packed with mourners, family members who had come from across the country, neighbors from Maple Street, some of whom had lived there as long as Mr. Harry had. Former colleagues from the postal service, grey-haired men and women who remembered walking their routes with him in the days before email made letter-writing obsolete. And firefighters, a whole row of them in their dress uniforms, there to honor the man whose life had been saved by a little girl's memory and their own swift action. Emma sat in the front row with Patricia and her family, feeling the weight of the occasion pressing down on her. Mr. Harry had been a constant in her life for as long as she could remember. Even after the fire, even after he moved to Sunset Gardens, he had been there, a phone call away, a weekend visit away, a butterscotch candy and a warm smile away. And now he was gone. When it was her turn to speak, Emma walked to the podium on legs that felt unsteady. She looked out at the sea of faces, at the people who had loved Mr. Harry in their own ways, and she took a deep breath. "Mr. Harry taught me that everyone has a story worth hearing," Emma said, standing at the podium in her black dress, looking out at the crowd of mourners. "He taught me that paying attention to people isn't just polite, it's important. And he taught me that friendship doesn't care about age or background or how much you have in common. What matters is that you show up, that you listen, that you remember." She paused, gathering herself. "I was 6 years old when I helped save Mr. Harry's life, but really, he saved mine. He showed me what kind of person I wanted to be. He believed in me when I was just a little kid with a lot of questions and no idea what I was capable of. He gave me his time, his stories, his butterscotch candies." She smiled through her tears. "He gave me everything he had, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift." After the funeral, Patricia found Emma in the reception hall. "My father left you something in his will," she said. "I hope that's okay." Emma nodded, surprised. "What is it?" Patricia handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter written in Mr. Harry's shaky handwriting and a small photograph of a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. "That's my mother," Patricia said. "When she was about your age. Dad wanted you to have it, along with the letter." Emma read the letter that night, alone in her room, the flame pendant warm against her chest. "Dear Emma, if you're reading this, it means I've gone to be with my Mary at last. Don't be sad for me. I lived a long life, longer than I should have, thanks to you. I want you to know that saving my life was only part of what you did for me. You also gave me 5 more years of friendship, of gardening, of watching you grow into the remarkable young woman I always knew you would become. Those years were a gift, and I will be forever grateful for them. Keep listening, Emma. Keep paying attention to the people around you. The world needs more people who truly hear each other. The world needs more people like you. I'm leaving you Mary's picture because you reminded me of her in so many ways. She was a listener too, always making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. You have that same quality. Use it well. Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for remembering the cellar. With all my love, Harry Patterson." Emma cried for a long time, holding the letter and the photograph and the pendant, feeling the weight of loss and love and gratitude all mixed together. But she also felt something else. Purpose. Mr. Harry had given her more than his time and his stories. He'd given her a direction, a way of being in the world that felt right and true. She would keep listening. She would keep paying attention. She would keep being the kind of person who remembered the cellars. The years continued their march. Emma graduated from high school as valedictorian, her speech focused on the importance of community and connection. She went to college to study social work, drawn to a career that would let her spend her life listening to people, helping them, being there when they needed someone to pay attention. During her freshman year, she volunteered at a crisis hotline, answering calls from people in their darkest moments. The training was intense, focused on listening skills, on hearing what people weren't saying as much as what they were. Emma excelled at it. She'd been practicing her whole life. "You're a natural," her supervisor told her. "Most people have to learn how to really listen. You already know." Emma thought about Mr. Harry, about the butterscotch candies and the stories about the old days. She thought about the cellar under the back porch, the secret that had saved his life because she'd been paying attention. "I had a good teacher," she said. After college, Emma returned to Phoenix. She got a job at a community center in her old neighborhood, working with at-risk youth, with struggling families, with elderly residents who reminded her so much of Mr. Harry that it sometimes made her chest ache. The community center was called Hope House, and it had been serving the neighborhood for over 30 years. It was a modest building, nothing fancy, but it was a lifeline for people who had nowhere else to turn. Emma's office was small, just a desk and 2 chairs and a window that looked out on the parking lot, but it was hers, her space, her place to make a difference. Her job title was Community Outreach Coordinator, but in practice she did a little bit of everything. She ran after-school programs for kids whose parents worked late. She organized food drives and clothing donations. She connected elderly residents with services they needed but didn't know how to access. And she listened. Always, she listened. The people who came to Hope House were often at the end of their rope. They'd lost jobs, lost homes, lost hope. They came looking for help, but what they often needed most was someone to hear them, someone to validate their struggles, someone to remind them that they weren't alone. Emma was that someone. She sat with them in her small office, or on the benches outside, or in the community room over cups of bad coffee, and she listened to their stories. She remembered their names, their children's names, their concerns and fears and dreams. She followed up with phone calls and visits and small gestures that showed she cared. She was good at her job, really good, because she listened, because she paid attention, because she remembered the details that other people forgot. On the 10th anniversary of the fire, Emma went back to Maple Street. The lot where Mr. Harry's house had stood was no longer empty. A new house had been built there, a modern structure that looked nothing like the 1952 original. A young family lived there now, a couple with 2 small children who played in a yard that had no vegetable garden, no root cellar, no connection to the history that Emma carried in her heart. She stood on the sidewalk for a long time, looking at the house, remembering the smoke, the sirens, the panic of running toward the fire trucks, the moment when Mr. Harry's eyes met hers through the chaos, and he lifted his hand in a small wave. "Excuse me, can I help you?" Emma turned to find a woman about her age, standing on the porch of her grandmother's old house. Rosa had passed away 3 years ago, and the house had been sold to a young couple who were slowly renovating it. "Sorry," Emma said. "I used to live here. My grandmother owned this house for over 40 years. The Rodriguez house? We found some of her photos when we were cleaning out the attic. And some newspaper clippings about a fire?" Emma smiled. "That would be about me. I was 6 when I helped save our neighbor from that fire across the street." The woman's eyes widened. "That was you? The little girl who remembered the cellar? That was me. Oh my God. My husband and I read all about it when we were researching the neighborhood's history. It's an amazing story. Would you like to come in? I'd love to hear more about it." Emma thought about it for a moment. She had planned to just walk by, to pay her respects to the past, and then move on. But something about this woman's open curiosity, her genuine interest, reminded her of all the people who had listened to her over the years. "I'd like that," Emma said. "Thank you." They sat in the living room that Emma remembered from her childhood, though it looked different now with fresh paint and modern furniture. Emma told the whole story, from the moment she saw the smoke to the moment the firefighters emerged from the burning house with Mr. Harry in their arms. The woman, whose name was Jennifer, listened with rapt attention. Her husband, Tom, came in halfway through and sat down to listen too. By the end, both of them were wiping tears from their eyes. "That's incredible," Jennifer said. "You were just a little kid and you saved his life." "I was a kid who paid attention," Emma said. "That's all. Anyone could have done what I did if they'd listened to Mr. Harry's stories." "But most people wouldn't have remembered," Tom said. "Most people don't listen like that." "Most people can learn to," Emma replied. "That's what I've discovered in my work. Listening isn't some special talent that only a few people have. It's a skill anyone can develop. You just have to care enough to try." They talked for another hour about the neighborhood, about the changes it had undergone, about the community that still existed beneath the surface of new houses and new residents. Emma told them about Mr. Harry's garden, about her grandmother's cooking, about the block parties they used to have every summer. By the time she left, Jennifer and Tom had promised to attend the next neighborhood association meeting, to get to know their neighbors better, to pay attention to the community they'd joined. One more ripple, Emma thought as she walked back to her car. That was how it worked. One person listening could inspire another person to listen, and that person could inspire another, and so on, spreading outward like rings in a pond. Mr. Harry had understood that. He'd spent his life listening to people, making them feel heard, planting seeds of connection wherever he went. And Emma was doing the same thing now, carrying his legacy forward into a world that desperately needed more listeners. The drive home took her past the fire station where she'd received her medal 15 years ago. On impulse, she pulled into the parking lot. The station looked the same, though she knew the personnel had changed. Captain Torres had retired 5 years ago, moved to a cabin in Flagstaff, where he spent his days fishing and hiking. She'd gotten a Christmas card from him last year, a photo of him with his grandchildren, and a note that said, "Still telling everyone about the bravest 6-year-old I ever met." She went inside, drawn by nostalgia and something else she couldn't quite name. The firefighter at the front desk was young, probably not even born when the fire happened. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I hope so," Emma said. "My name is Emma Rodriguez. About 15 years ago, I was here for a ceremony. I helped locate a victim during a house fire when I was 6 years old." The young firefighter's eyes lit up with recognition. "The cellar girl! They still tell that story during training. You're like a legend around here," Emma laughed. "I'm no legend, just someone who listened to her neighbor. Still, that's amazing. What brings you back?" "I'm not sure, honestly. I was in the neighborhood and I felt drawn to stop by. I guess I wanted to say thank you to all of you for what you do every day." The firefighter smiled. "That means a lot. Would you like a tour? We've upgraded a lot of equipment since you were last here, but the bones of the place are the same." Emma spent an hour at the station, meeting the new crew, hearing about the advances in firefighting technology, sharing her story with firefighters who had only heard it secondhand. By the time she left, she'd been invited to speak at the next training session to tell her story to the new recruits. "We always emphasize the importance of community intelligence," the young firefighter explained. "Knowing your neighbors, understanding the buildings in your area. Your story is the perfect example of why that matters." "I'd be honored," Emma said. A month later, she stood in front of a room full of firefighting recruits, wearing her flame pendant and carrying the medal she'd received when she was 6. "I was 6 years old when I learned that everyone has a story worth hearing," she began. "My neighbor was an 84-year-old retired postal worker named Harry Patterson. He used to sit on his porch and give me butterscotch candies, and he'd tell me stories about the old days. I loved those stories, even the ones I didn't fully understand, because Mr. Harry was my friend, and friends listened to each other. She told them about the fire, about the smoke she'd seen from her grandmother's porch, about calling 911 and watching the firefighters arrive. She told them about the frantic search, about the growing desperation as the teams couldn't locate the victim. I remembered something Mr. Harry had told me once, about a root cellar under his back porch, built in 1952 by his father. It was just a casual comment, the kind of thing most people would have forgotten immediately. But I was paying attention, and that attention saved his life." She looked out at the recruits, young men and women, who would soon be running into burning buildings to save strangers. "You'll learn a lot of technical skills in your training. How to fight fires, how to search buildings, how to operate equipment. All of that is crucial, but don't forget the human element. Get to know the people in your communities. Listen to their stories. Remember the details that seem unimportant, because you never know when a root cellar in 1952 might be the difference between a rescue and a recovery. After the presentation, a young woman approached her. She couldn't have been more than 20, with bright eyes and an earnest expression. "Ms. Rodriguez, I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story. My grandfather was a firefighter for 30 years, and he always said the best rescues came from knowing the community. But I never really understood what he meant until today." Emma smiled. "What was your grandfather's name?" "Michael Torres. He was a captain here for about a decade before he retired." "Captain Torres." Emma's eyes widened. "He was the one who listened to me that day. He was the one who took a 6-year-old seriously and ordered his teams to search the cellar." Now it was the young woman's turn to look surprised. "He never told me that part of the story. He just talked about the little girl who remembered the cellar. He's a big reason why Mr. Harry survived. I provided the information, but he acted on it. He believed me when he could have dismissed me as just a scared kid with an overactive imagination. That sounds like my grandpa. He always said kids were more observant than adults give them credit for." "He was right," Emma said. "I'm living proof." They exchanged contact information, and Emma made a mental note to reach out to Captain Torres to thank him again for listening to her all those years ago. The ripples kept spreading, connecting people across years and generations. That night, Emma sat in her apartment, looking out the window at the Phoenix skyline. The flame pendant was warm against her chest, a constant reminder of Mr. Harry and his wife Mary and all the stories they had shared. She thought about the path her life had taken since that August day when she was 6, the interviews and ceremonies, yes, but also the quieter things, the friendships she'd built, the people she'd helped in her work, the lives she'd touched simply by paying attention, by really hearing what people had to say. It had all started with butterscotch candies and stories on a front porch, with an old man who took time for a little girl, who shared his memories and his wisdom, who never made her feel like she was too young to understand. Mr. Harry had saved her life too, Emma realized. Not in the dramatic, pulled from the flames way that she'd saved his, but in a deeper way. He'd shown her who she could be. He'd given her a model for how to move through the world, for how to connect with people, for how to make a difference. And she would spend the rest of her life paying that forward. Tomorrow, there would be more people to listen to, more stories to hear, more details to remember that might someday, in some unexpected way, make all the difference. Emma Rodriguez was ready for all of it. She had been ready since she was 6 years old, sitting on a porch across the street from a man with butterscotch candies and a secret cellar, learning that the most powerful thing anyone can do is simply pay attention. The end of one story is always the beginning of another. And Emma's story, the one that started with smoke and sirens and a little girl's desperate run toward the fire trucks, was far from over. It was continuing even now, in the lives of everyone she touched, in the ripples that spread outward from that single moment of listening, of remembering, of caring enough to act. That was Mr. Harry's legacy. That was Emma's gift. And it would keep spreading, keep touching lives, keep making a difference, for as long as there were people willing to really, truly listen. The world was full of noise, advertisements and social media and endless streams of information competing for attention. In that cacophony, it was easy to miss the quiet voices, the soft stories, the memories shared by those who had lived long enough to have something worth sharing. But Emma had learned from a very young age that those quiet voices often held the most important truths, that the stories told on front porches, over butterscotch candies, in the golden hour before sunset, were the ones that could change everything. Mr. Harry had known that. He had spent his life collecting stories, sharing them, keeping the memories of his community alive, and Emma had been his best student, absorbing his lessons without even realizing she was being taught. Now she carried those lessons forward, in her work, in her relationships, in every interaction with every person she met. She listened, she remembered, she paid attention to the details that others dismissed as unimportant, And sometimes, just sometimes, that attention made all the difference. It had made all the difference on a scorching August day in Phoenix when a little girl remembered a cellar and saved an old man's life. It would make all the difference again, in ways she couldn't yet imagine, in moments she couldn't yet foresee. Because that was the nature of listening. That was the power of paying attention. You never knew which detail would matter. You never knew which story would save a life. So you listened to all of them. You heard everyone. You remembered everything you could. And you trusted that when the moment came, the right memory would surface, the right words would come, the right action would present itself. That was what Emma had learned at 6 years old. That was what she would carry with her forever. The gift of listening, the power of attention, the legacy of an old man with butterscotch candies and a secret cellar, and the knowledge that everyone, regardless of age or circumstance, has the potential to be exactly the hero that someone else needs.